Hi, welcome to One Good Idea. I'm your host, Peter Franzen. I'm the Associate Executive Director at the Children's Education Alliance of Missouri, and this is One Good Idea. It's the CEAM podcast. Today, we're talking about A through F school report cards, an issue that's gaining momentum here in Missouri. Earlier this year, Governor Mike Kehoe issued an executive order directing the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to develop an A through F grading system to give parents clearer, more transparent information about school performance. Now, at the same time, the Missouri legislature is actively debating whether to codify that system into law, raising questions about how school performance is measured, how that information is communicated to families, and what real accountability should look like for our traditional public schools. Today's guest is Patricia Levesque, the Executive Director of ExcelinEd. That's a national education policy organization founded by former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. They put on great conferences that I love to go to every year. Now, Patricia has spent decades working at the highest levels of education policy, including serving as Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Bush, where she helped lead many of Florida's landmark education reforms. And today, she works with states across the country to advance policies that improve transparency, accountability, and educational opportunities for families. So we're joined here by Patricia. Hi, Patricia.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm great. Welcome to One Good Idea.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Patricia, we're going to just jump right in. Now, you've worked on education policy at a high level for many years, including in Florida, or especially in Florida, I should say. Can you just give us a quick overview of your background and how you got involved in this work?
Sure, happy to. It really started almost 30 years ago when I started working in the Florida legislature, and I was assigned to work on education policy. So I listened and learned for the first couple of years, and then I became the staff director of the K-12 committee when Governor Bush first became governor. So my first big bill was his A-plus plan bill. So a state that was one of the first to expand assessment, to issue A through F school letter grades, to advance the first statewide private school choice program. That was one of my first bills. I worked for 6 years in the legislature, and then, as you mentioned, I joined Governor Bush in his second term. And when he left office, we started the foundation in order to help other states learn, if anything, from what Florida had done, because we had moved from being in the bottom 10 states to being in the top 10 in a really relatively short period of time. And so if there's anything that we learned, because we practiced and experimented with a lot of things, we wanted to help other states.
Wow. Well, that's right. I can attest to that. I've been at CEAM for 15 years. So I've definitely been watching from Missouri and learning all along the way about the work that you've done there. Not everyone who's watching is the education policy wonk, of course. Some people may not be familiar with exactly what A through F school report cards are, and just importantly, what they are not. Can you just explain the concept?
Sure. The concept of A through F school report cards is really to be transparent to parents and the public with how a particular public school is doing. And so issuing A, B, C, D, F letter grades, kind of the same way students earn letter grades, is a way to be transparent with parents and the public. Some states have very different ways of describing how their public schools are doing. They issue performance levels or number of stars or verbal descriptors or colors. And when you really talk to parents and the public and you give them a choice of how would you want your state to communicate how a school is doing, A through F letter grades is always the top performing poll tested way to rate schools, because parents instinctively understand A and B is good, D and F not so good, C lots of room for improvement.
Right. Well, Missouri, I think is currently debating whether to implement this A through F system beyond the governor's executive order. From your perspective, what problem are these systems trying to solve? What is the problem that A through F is solving for us?
Yeah. Well, I would say there's two things. One is the clarity of how a school is doing according to whatever the state is measuring, right? So that clear communication is one issue that's trying to be solved. The second would be how you calculate your school grade, right? What goes into what's getting measured. And so I do think it's really important that states focus on very clear, simple, transparent indicators in what they measure. And all of it is for the ultimate goal of giving parents information about their own child's school or about other schools if they are looking around and exercising school choice.
Right, right, because you feel like that common language of A through F really helps parents make some decisions and at the very least understand the school that their kids may be attending and hopefully help them make some comparison or inform their decisions about where they might send their kid to school if they live in a state like Florida with a lot of options.
Absolutely. And when schools earn letter grades, you're going to notice a couple of things that will happen. First, the media will cover how school performance is going because the media now will be able to report on what's going on in this particular media market or in this particular school district. And what I've noticed in any state that passes A through F school letter grades, there's kind of a why did this school earn this particular grade? And so the media and the general public starts digging into, well, what actually happened in reading? What actually happened in math or graduation rates or making progress? And so it really focuses the public on what's underlying this letter grade. We want to better understand it. So it raises curiosity and attention to student
Right.
performance.
I totally agree with that, Patricia. I mean, that's, I think we see that, the media only has so much time to explain something and to get somebody to, and having that, just like with parents, having that, I think the general public, when they hear those kind of news stories, exactly like you said, it's just, it immediately makes sense. It's like, oh, that school is a C. I wonder why it's average, and kind of gives some context sort of from the beginning. Now, Florida has an A through F system, right, for over 20 years.
Yes.
What impact do you feel like you all have seen, and what has the state learned from that experience, do you feel like?
That's a great question. I think what you can clearly see in Florida data, and you can see it in the NAEP data. So NAEP is the National Assessment of Education Progress. It's the only state test that all 50 states participate in. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Florida went from being in the bottom 10 in student performance in reading and math to being in very short order in the top 10. And that is because of having a really strong, clear accountability system. Everyone wants to be an A or a B, right? Even being a C is not acceptable. The teachers, the students, the parents, everyone wants to see that upward performance. And so having an A through F school letter grade actually applies some really positive pressure on getting everyone to want to get together to help make sure students are achieving and making progress.
Right, right. When critics say that A through F grades oversimplify school performance, and I feel like I've heard some of this just now in your responses, but how do you respond to that about oversimplifying things?
I think that is clearly something that we hear in multiple states when you have this kind of discussion of A through F grades, because they'll say it's not fair, it's too simple, it doesn't reflect everything that we're doing as a school. I would say I always remark about one thing. Well, if letter grades are drawing this attention and whatever your rating system before wasn't, right? There hasn't been a change wholesale in your schools. It's how you're explaining how performance is going. So one of the things about A through F grades is it brings attention and focus to student learning outcomes. And so when you look at the data and then the public starts saying, well, this school only has 5% of the students that can read on grade level, it would be unconscionable almost to give for that school to earn anything more than an F, right? If 95% of the kids can't read. So I think some of those issues of fairness go away when people really understand that this is a reflection, it's a snapshot of how the overall school is doing. I think the other really important thing is what you measure. And so when we work with state leaders on actually implementing what goes into the calculation, I would say we recommend that you measure three things very simply and clearly so that you're sending a clear message to every single classroom teacher. Number one, you want that teacher to focus on every single student that I'm teaching. You want them to try to get those kids to grade level performance or higher, which is the goal that every parent wants, right? The second, the second signal that you want to send to teachers is that every student that I teach, regardless of where they started with me at the beginning of the school year, you want them to make progress. High performers, you want them to continue to make progress. Low performers, you want to move them from where they started in your classroom, right?
Right.
The third signal is you want the most low performing students to make extra progress, because if we don't start catching them up, they'll never get to that grade level proficiency. And so in any state that's working on this, when people start talking about, well, that's not fair, it's because you've got to measure multiple things. You can't just measure proficiency. You've got to look at progress, and you really have to look at the progress of your lowest performing students.
Right. And progress and growth. Is growth a measurement in there as well?
Growth and progress. I use those interchangeably, yes.
Right. That's what, I remember in Missouri, there was a little bit of an outcry about this. I think maybe someone went ahead and did a process and created some A through F report cards. And without the legislation behind it, it wasn't us, but somebody did it. And I just remember the outcry about schools that, were an F, and how they just thought that was just going to be devastating to the students who attended those schools. And is that really true, or what happens when a school turns out that they get an F?
Let me tell you two things. First, there was a former commissioner of education in Florida. Her name is Pam Stewart, and she will share this particular story. She happened to be a principal of a Title I school, and when Florida first issued letter grades, the school that she taught in earned a D, and she was upset. She was saying the same things that you're talking about. It's not fair. We have really low income kids. We work so hard. This is not a great measure. But guess what? She pulled her teachers together and said, we are not a D, and we're going to prove it, right? And so they focused on the students that needed more supports. They focused on intervention. They focused on the fundamentals. And she moved that school from being a D to an A school. And she would say, this when she was a principal, she ended up being commissioner of education many years later. She said, if it weren't for those letter grades, I wouldn't have changed anything I would have been doing as a principal. We were satisfied. We thought we were doing well. It wasn't until there was a spotlight and my school earned a D that I realized we've got to do more. We've got to do better. We've got to really help these kids with outcomes. And so there's a galvanizing, there's a focusing effect, right? There's a lot of positive pressure that the adults are like, this is serious. We got to help these kids in reading and math and making progress.
Yes, I think that's it. Sometimes comes across as a little bit of a double standard, because of course we grade kids with A through F, and if a kid gets an F, we're not saying that they're a failure as a human being.
They just haven't gotten it yet,
they
right?
just didn't get the concept yet, and so we work harder, and then the reward of coming out of that F space to C and B and A space, I mean, that's the reward, right? That's I did it.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that's I think sometimes if we're working with tough populations of students, if we're in a place that's low income, whether that's urban or rural, if there's a challenge there, sometimes well-meaning adults can feel like, oh, these kids have already been through so much, we're just going to make it worse by telling them that they're failures, when We're really talking about the school itself.
Right. President Bush, 43, said it well. It's this a soft bigotry of low expectations. We're just not going to set our standards very high for them. And it really is devastating if we write off, whole generations of kids because of their background. Like that,
Right.
we can't do that. We got to make sure every kid gets the supports and the instruction that they need in order to succeed.
I totally agree. Do you do you have thoughts about, so as Missouri considers this? I mean, Governor Kehoe has created this executive order. The legislature is now trying to enshrine that. What do you think are some of the most important things that policymakers need to get right, that they need to get right about this legislation when they make it?
That's a great question. First, I want to applaud Governor Kehoe. I think it's so important when the governor of the state takes on and makes education a priority, and him making A through F school letter grades and accountability a real focus is so important. That leadership is fantastic. As the legislature considers this, and as the department works on actually implementing, I would give a couple of pieces of advice. One that we've already talked about, like the signals that you need to send. So what you measure should send signals to the teacher. Help every student get to grade level performance or higher. Help every student make growth or progress from wherever they started. Help the lowest performing students make extra progress. The other things that we would, ask states to consider and think about: clear, simple, transparent measurements. So how you measure those things is really important. Not having too many measures. Some states will measure all of those things we just talked about, and then they'll add 15 other indicators. And all those 15 other indicators end up weighing more than whether or not a student can actually read or do math or make progress or graduate, right? And so be very careful about the number of indicators. Be very careful about how you measure. Make sure it's a simple calculation. Don't use things like indexes where you're earning a partial point for this if a student is at the lowest performing level, and a fraction of a point here and extra bonus points there. All of that blurs the fact that you just need a simple indicator of what percent of kids in this school could read on grade level or higher. Very clear. The number of kids that read on grade level or higher on the test divided by the total number that took the test. Very simple measures are important. You don't want it to be complex. You don't want to measure things that can be gamed. Like, this is not what's being discussed in Missouri, but other states, like we want to put participation in fine arts classes. Not that we don't have anything against fine arts classes, but that's something that can be gamed, right? You can just assign every student, you have to take a fine arts class. And so you have to have objective measures. They need to be simple, they need to be clear, they need to be transparent. And then ultimately, when the state board or the commissioner sets the scale, right? What is an A, B, C, D, or F? Where you set that scale, it really should be aspirational yet attainable.
Okay.
That's one principle. And the second thing is the bar needs to increase over time. So on that first principle of being aspirational yet attainable, most people would think, well, an A school is one where 90 to 100, right? 90% of the kids can read on grade level to 100%. If you probably set that level of a bar in most states, maybe you'll have 2% of your schools that would be A, and you'd have a lot that would be D's and F's. You have to set the bar almost like a bell curve at the beginning.
Okay.
Because that is a normal distribution. But then guess what? School performance, student performance will increase. Oh, that's the thing I forgot to remark on before. When Florida first started grading schools, it was a bell-shaped curve. We had 27% of the schools were D's or F's, versus only 21% were A's or B's, right? In 1 year, we had almost no F schools. Like in 1 year, just that spurt of, oh my goodness, we're going to step up our game, caused student performance to go up, and school performance went up, right? But what we learned is You can't set the bar and then walk away and feel like, oh, that's it. Because as schools meet the bar, you have to regularly increase it. And when a state like Florida doesn't, you started seeing performance on the NAEP flat line, right? Mississippi is a great example of a state that lots of people have been talking about it. They've been in the news. Presidential candidates are talking about Mississippi Miracle.
Right.
We will call a Mississippi Marathon because it took a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication to get where they are. But they started with A through F school letter grading, and then they added literacy, comprehensive literacy based reforms. But their A through F letter grading this past year, Mississippi just raised the bar on their scale. They could sit back. We're number 9 now in the country in reading, but they're like, no, we've got to continually raise that bar. So aspirational yet attainable scale, but then you have to have kind of an automatic mechanism. When you hit a certain number of A or B schools, the scale's got to increase, and that gives you that predictability, that consistency, but it raises the bar over time so that you're constantly going to get that upward movement in student performance.
Oh, those are some great gems. I hope the legislature watches this. That is awesome. Well, Patricia, let me wrap up. What if Missouri passes A through F and it becomes part of how we do business with K-12 education? What do you think Missourians would see differently in a couple of years down the road? What would we look back and how do you think it would be different?
That's a great one. You're going to see rising student achievement. That'll be one thing that if you pass school letter grades and you have a really strong set of measurements and your scale is aspirational yet attainable, you will start seeing student performance increase in Missouri. And the news media is going to start talking about the Missouri Miracle and improvements that are going on there. The other thing that will happen will be pushback. Like there will be people. When you have an A through F letter grade, one of the things that I say is it's sharp like a two-edged sword. You get a lot of focus because people understand the letter grades.
Yep.
You get a lot of focus because people understand the letter grades. And so you'll have a lot more tension, I would say, on change the calculation, change the law until you reach this point where the schools and the leaders are, you know what, we can do this, we can handle this, we're in that rhythm of continually improving and working towards supporting kids every single year. Those are the things that I would say you can expect after you pass.
I like the sound of that. That's amazing. Well, Patricia, I appreciate you coming on and talking about this good idea about school report cards and A through F letter grades, and good luck with the work that you're doing nationally and in Florida. And I hope I see you at the next ExcelinEd summit. You guys always put on an amazing show. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's school report cards, A through F letter grades to help parents and everyone understand how schools are performing. That's our good idea today on One Good Idea. Thanks for listening, and tune in for our next episode when we explore another good idea in education.